We are on page Yud Gimel Amud Beis 13b, and we were learning yesterday about the obligation to not walk when reciting Shema. It's called, the term in the Hebrew is Amida, which literally means stand, but it doesn't mean that instead of sitting you should stand. It means instead of walking, you should stay in one place. And the mitzvah of saying Shema ba'amida in one place, we said, is an argument between the rabbis to how much of the Shema should be recited in one place. And so the Gemara said that until Alav Avecha ba'amida, until the words Alav Avecha, that's how much you should stay in one place. And Rabbi Yochanan said the whole parsha. And so we mentioned that there are reasons to say that would apply the way we paskin to only the first pasuk. That Shema Yisrael and, of course, Baruch Shem always goes together with Shema Yisrael. So that would apply to the first pasuk of Shema, that you should stand in one place. However, I did mention there are opinions that say actually we would follow until Alav Avecha, that you should really stand in one place until Alav Avecha. It's not brought in Shulchan Aruch, but there are opinions in the Rishonim that would be the halacha. Okay, and then we also spoke about elongating the echad, and we mentioned that the main thing is in kavanah and machshava, that right after we finish, we should make sure, right after we finish reciting the word echad, we should make sure to have those ideas in mind. We mentioned that the ches, the seven heavens and one earth, the daled is the four ruchos, the four directions, and Hashem is king over all of these. That's the aleph. And we also mentioned how you have to be careful how to say it, that you shouldn't, if you say the aleph too long, the ches shouldn't be elongated too much. It shouldn't be shortened too much either. And the daled, you should make sure to have in mind those what we mentioned. In this way, it'll be Mayrich Yomav Ushnoisav. You will lengthen your days in your year. And then we mentioned that the Kriya Shema of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was simply Shema Yisrael, and that's really where we're gonna start here at the two dots, about 15, maybe 20 lines up from the bottom, maybe 18 lines up from the bottom. Tanu Rabbanon, we're in 13b. The rabbis learned Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The Shema sentence, this is Zu Kriya Shema Shel Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. This is the Kriya Shema of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Now, we have to, before we continue, we have to mention that there is a concept called Toirasoi Umnasoi. There are people, you don't find it much nowadays. Maybe you'll find a few people like this in Israel. I'm not sure. But even big rabbis, you don't normally consider them Toirasoi Umnasoi, that their Torah is their only position, and all they do all day is learn Torah, There's zero work, zero involvement with anything materialistic or secular, nothing at all. Everything is just Torah learning. It's Teirasai Nasai. And because of that, it awakens a question as to what should they do regarding prayer, regarding Shema. If they are learning Torah all day, which one overrides the other? Should they interrupt their Torah study for prayer, or should their prayer be should it not be an obligation on them because their Torah study takes precedence? And this is a discussion. This is talked about in the Shulchan Aruch, and the halacha is that someone who is Teirasai Nasai, someone who Torah is their job, and that means that they don't interrupt for a moment of studying Torah. For them, they do not have to daven. They skip davening, and they but they are obligated to say Shema. And the reason for that is that Shema is a biblical obligation, at least part of the Shema, and tefillah it's debated if it's a biblical obligation or rabbinic. And even if you say it's a biblical obligation, the biblical obligation doesn't take on the same level of importance as the obligation of studying Torah, because Torah is called Chaye Olam. It's called forever, everlasting life. And tefillah, davening, is called Chaye Sha'ah, temporary life, which means that the davening, you're davening for the current issue that is bothering you. Torah, you're giving life, you're giving long-term life to yourself. And so Torah is called Chaye Olam, forever, everlasting life. When we study Hashem's Torah, we are connecting to the infinite. We are absorbing life, infinite life. And when we pray, we are asking Hashem for temporary respite from this issue and from that issue, salvation from this. It's more of a temporary type of mitzvah, and this is more of a permanent. And therefore, the obligation of davening didn't apply to someone who was Teirasai Nasai. Again, even rabbis who we see in studying Torah all day, they also interrupt to pay their electric bill, you don't find this type of a studying Torah with zero nonstop. Maybe like people would say, maybe the Vilna Gaon was someone, he wouldn't talk to people. He wouldn't visit, he wouldn't, if his relative came, I think they say he never didn't even stop to greet her because he was busy studying Torah. It's a different level. It's in a different league. It's like someone who's in a different realm of holiness. That's not the norm, and that's called Teirasai Nasai. They had different. They would be in a different category. So that's that. So that is what we're touching upon here, because we're touching upon Rebbe Yehuda Hanassi. Rebbe Yehuda Hanassi was considered to be Teirasai Nasai. Now, it deserves to be looked into exactly what falls into the category of Teirasai Nasai, because we do know that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi did have a lot of interaction with the Roman emperor, So the question is, would that have ruined his Tairasa Yom Nasai? In other words, a lot of their discussions was Torah, so that maybe was not a problem. But it would seem maybe there might have been discussions, and would that have ruined it in any sense or form? Our Gemara is following this understanding that Rebbe is Tairasa Yom Nasai. His Torah was everything, and he wouldn't interrupt for any other matters, and therefore it says here that the Shema of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi consisted of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What does that mean? That his Shema was just Shema Yisrael? That means that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi followed this rule that you only do the biblical obligation. What's the biblical obligation? The first pasuk. So he didn't say the whole Shema. He just said the first pasuk of the Shema. And this was his Shema. Amar le Rav l'Reb Chia. Rav said to Reb Chia, Loi chazeina le l'Rebbe, I did not see Rebbe the makabel ale malchus shamayim, that he was makabel on himself, he accepted on himself the yoke of heaven. And what that means is that Rebbe would give a class, not a 1-hour class like the Levi Yitzchak Senior Academy. He would give a 3-4 hour class, and he would go from the time that the time of Shema began until it was too late to say Shema. And so these rabbis are discussing, when does our Rebbe say Shema? How does he get away with when does he say Shema? I didn't see him stop. And I think the understanding was that maybe the students, they used to excuse themselves once in a while, So when they excuse themselves, they would say the Shema when they were out. But the Rebbe, who was teaching the class for 3-4 hours, he was sitting there the whole time. So what did he do about the Shema? Again, about the davening was not a problem because he was Tairasa Yom Nasai. He did not have to daven. But he was exempt from davening. But the Shema, what did he do about Shema? The students, they probably, they took a break, a 5-minute break during their, and they would walk out when they needed a little fresh air or they needed to use the bathroom, whatever. And then they would say the Shema while they took their break, and then they would come back. But he was sitting there the whole time, constantly teaching Torah. So when did he say Shema? So this is what these rabbis are asking. When does our Rebbe Yehuda Hanasi, when does he say Shema? I haven't seen him. Rav told Reb Chia, I didn't see him say Shema. So Amar Le, so Reb Chia told Rav, Bar Pachsi, you are the son of a noble, Ben Gedolim, son of a great people. That's what he called him, Bar Pachsi. B'shah Shemaver Yodav al Panav, when Rebbe puts his hand over his face, Mekabel olav oil malchus shamayim. He accepts on himself the yoke of heaven. So what does this mean? That if you looked closely at Reb Yehuda Hanasi giving his class during those 4 hours, at one point, maybe for 5 seconds, he would put his hand over his head, and no one would know what was going on. They would, it looked like maybe he was thinking what he's going to say next, or he was thinking about something that's bothering him, a question that came up, whatever it is. But really what he was doing was reciting the Shema. Now, this is the source, by the way, that we put our right hand over our eyes when we say the Shema. This is the source. You've now learned the source. It's because Rebbe used to do this when he was giving his class to his students. He would put his hand over his eyes and he would say the Shema. What's interesting is our Gemara uses the plural, Yodav. I wonder if that means he would put both hands over his eyes. It's a plural. Yadav. Yadoi would be singular. But we only put our right hand over our eyes, and that is when Rebbe used to be accepting on himself the yoke of heaven. So the Gemara now asks a question of the fact that Rebbe would say the one verse of Shema, which was the biblical verse according to his opinion. In other words, and that's the halacha that we follow. That biblically, I mean, I shouldn't say that we follow. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch a few different opinions that what biblically is the mitzvah of saying Shema. But Rebbe held that it was the first pasuk, and for many things that we seem to follow that because we hold that the first pasuk you have to have kavana and so on. So it does seem like there is some element in halacha that we sort of follow that, although there are the other views as well. If the whole paragraph is biblically, the first two paragraphs might be biblically obligated. There are a few opinions brought in Shulchan Aruch. So I should take that back. I keep saying the first verse is the biblical obligation, and it could be that that's the main opinion, but the others are brought in Shulchan Aruch as well. So Rebbe obviously felt that it's held that it's only the first verse. And that's why Rebbe would just say the Shema, put his hand over his eyes, and he fulfilled the obligation. Now, the question is, when he finished giving his class, it was already too late to say Shema anymore. The time of Shema passed. So the Gemara has an interesting question. Would he then go and, even though he missed the time of Shema, would he go and recite the Shema anyway after his class was over? So the Gemara has an argument.
Hello?
Let me mute everyone. So the Gemara now has an argument. Let's continue in the Gemara. Would Rebbe go back and finish the Shema later, or would he not do that? Bar kapara omer, einay chayzer v'goymer. He would say that he didn't go back and recite the Shema. Reb Shimon beRebbe omer chayzer v'goymer. Reb Shimon, the son of Rebbe, said he would go back and finish the Shema. Amar leik bar kapara leReb Shimon beRebbe. So bar kapara tried to bring a proof to Reb Shimon beRebbe, Reb Shimon, Rebbe's son. And he said, I have a proof that Rebbe would not go back and recite the complete Shema, because he's going to prove it from the fact that Rebbe used to always say a vart, a vertel, some type of a insight into the obligation that had to do with mentioning the exodus of Egypt, Yetzias Mitzrayim. He would somehow mix in something about the exodus from Egypt in his class. So it sounds like he would say the Shema, he would put his hand over his eyes, say the Shema, the first verse, and then he would say, the Eibishter took us out of Mitzrayim, and we have an obligation. He would say something about Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then he would continue his class. Somehow we would mix it in maybe to what he was talking about, but he would always make sure to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, Bar Kapara says, why did Rebbe do that? There is a mitzvah of mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt, every day. Rebbe could have done it later. If he was going to say Shema later, he'll do the Yetzias Mitzrayim later as well. Why was he so careful to say something about Yetzias Mitzrayim when he said the Shema? It must be that he's not planning on getting involved in any of the Shema later, and therefore he's got to get done with it now. So he said the Shema Yisrael, the first verse, and he did the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, mentioning the exodus from Egypt right at when he had his class. And later on, he probably never went back to it. But if he was going to say it later and do all the paragraphs of the Shema, then it would make sense that he would not have to go in careful try to include the Exodus from Egypt, something about the Exodus from Egypt. He would not try to include it in his during his class, during his lecture, because he's anyway going to do it later. And the assumption, the understanding is that the Exodus from Egypt is not time bound like the Shema is. The Shema is limited to 3 hours. The Exodus from Egypt could have been done later. So if he's going to say Shema later, he'll do the Exodus from Egypt later. So that's what the Gemara is asking. So, and that's what Bar Kapara is trying to prove. So here we're gonna let's read the proof of Bar Kapara. Amar le Bar Kapara Reb Shimon Berebi. Bar Kapara said to Reb Shimon Berebi, Bishloima, it is good lididi, according to me, the amina that I say, Einoi Chayzer v'Goimra, Rebbe would not go back and finish the Shema, complete it. Hainu, and that's why the Mahade Rebbe, that Rebbe would always seek out a Shmaitza, a teaching, the Isbe Yetzias Mitzrayim, that mentions in it the Exodus from Egypt. Ela lididach, but according to you, the Amrit that you say Chayzer v'Goimra, that Rebbe would go and finish the Shema, complete the Shema later, even after the time of the Shema, he would make sure to finish it. Lama le liyahadure, why would he go and seek out a insight about a teaching about the Exodus from Egypt? Why would he go after that? Why would he try to search for some try to find some teaching about Yetzias Mitzrayim? Why would he do that? He's going to say it later. He's going to say the Exodus from Egypt later. So the Gemara says, Reb Shimon answers, Bar Kapara, Kadei lahazkir Yetzias Mitzrayim bizmano. The reason why he would make sure to say something about Yetzias Mitzrayim was because he wanted to include the Exodus from Egypt in the same time of the Shema, which is an interesting point, that there's some reason why you would include the Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim in the why it would need to be in that time of the Shema. What would the reason be? But in other words, if it's a mitzvah in its own right, it would seem that it doesn't it shouldn't be connected to Shema. It doesn't necessarily have to be connected to Shema. Of course, we say it together in the davening, but here he's not doing everything the way we're doing it. He's a Tairasa Yom Nasi. He's got his own rules, and he does the Shema, and he can do later. If he's going to say it later anyway, fulfill the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. So what comes out is that you see here that somehow the mentioning of Yetzias Mitzrayim is very interconnected to the Shema, and he wanted specifically to do it in the time of the Shema. I once heard a shiur from someone mentioned in the name of Rabbi Soloveitchik that the Rambam doesn't bring the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, of mentioning the Exodus from Egypt, as a mitzvah in its own right. So he said the reason is because it's really a part of the mitzvah of the Shema, that it's really a portion of the mitzvah of the Shema is the mentioning of the Exodus from Egypt. It's like part and parcel of this. It's part of that mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah in its own right. So I didn't look it up. I don't know. I'm just mentioning it. It's an interesting thought. But we see such a concept. This is his proof is from this Gemara, that it's to mention the Exodus from Egypt in its time. That's why Rebbe would do it, even though he might have said the Shema later with, possibly he would say Vayomer later and recite all of the 3 paragraphs later. But yet he wanted to do the Exodus from Egypt now because of that reason, because he wanted to, because the mitzvah of the Shema included the remembrance of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. Okay, so that's this piece of Gemara, which we learned about the idea of Teirasa Yom Nasai, that there are exemptions for davening and for saying the rest of Shema. Possible that Rebbe did not complete the Shema. This Gemara takes us back to the Mishnah, where we said that if a person missed the time of Shema, should they ka'adam ha'kairei b'Torah, it said, that it's considered as if they're like a kairei mekan va'elech. A person who reads it afterwards is considered that they are considered as if they are learning Torah. So the question is, so does that mean you should say it afterwards? We spoke about the time when it should be done, and then the question was, does you missed it, so what should you do? And the Mishnah said it's hakore mikan va'elach, where on page 9b, it said a person who reads after the 3rd hour, according to the opinion that we follow. If you read after the 3rd hour, it's loy hifsid, it's ka'adam hakore b'Torah. It's considered like you're like someone who's studying Torah when you say it. So in other words, should you be saying it afterwards if you missed it or not? So it seems this is what these rabbis are discussing, especially by someone who's Teirasa Yom Nasai. By him, should he say it? And this is very interesting, because you may say that a regular person should say Shema, even if he missed the time. Maybe there's some benefit in actually reciting the words of the Shema, and if a regular person should do that. He missed the time, but at least he should say it. Kabbalah, accepting the yoke of heaven, accepting the yoke of mitzvahs, the reading about the Exodus from Egypt. He's anyway got to say something about Yetzias Mitzrayim. So he missed the Shema. The Mishnah didn't make it so clear. Should he do it or not? It just says if a person does it, you don't lose. But does that mean you should do it? And now the Gemara is talking about someone who's Teirasa Yom Nasai, really his Torah learning overrides everything. So here it's an extra surprise to say that one of the rabbis says Rebbe would go and say the Shema anyway. I would think that his Torah study maybe would be override. If once he finished his class, it's after the time of the Shema, there is reason to say, well, he already finished, it's over. The time of Shema is over. And his Torah study is very valuable Torah study. This Teirasa Yom Nasai, his business, his job, his Torah study. So I would say for him, I don't know if he should say the Shema later. He should study the rest of Torah, which he studies in depth so maybe for him, maybe he shouldn't. In the Gemara here says there's 2 opinions. One opinion is that he wouldn't go and say it again. He fulfilled his obligation. The other opinion is no, he would actually say it and repeat, and he would recite all of the Shema. I'm not sure if this is connected to the fact that it has those, possibly because it has Kabbalah soil mitzvahs. It has, it has Vayomer. Another point is there is 245 words in the Shema, which if you say the Kel Melech Ne'eman, or you say Hashem Elokeichem, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, so that equals 248. So maybe he wants to, in order to get the blessing, the safety of that all your limbs should be healthy. But this is the argument here, if he would go back and recite the Shema in completion or not. I see we had a few questions. Ezra? Well, I can't hear you.
When I understand that first of all, lehavdil. I mean, an individual can actually say the Shema, because I'm trying to remember what I was thinking about when you were discussing this. An individual can say the Shema as a matter of or give a Torah study as if he were, for example, a professor of history or something like that, and have no connection at all to the spiritual aspect of the Torah itself. And so therefore, Rebbe, who was different from that, probably would say the Shema or go back and say the Shema. I mean, why would his son say what he said if he didn't believe that it was true? I mean, his son is basically saying, yes, he went back and he said it. As far as was it Bar Kapara, who basically says, he brings in these things in his drasha, which means that he understands exactly what it is, and he knows exactly where he is in terms of the time, and so therefore, by bringing these things in, he's actually doing what he's supposed to be doing, meaning to get it done within the time allotted to say the Shema. He may not say it in the sense of you and I, where we stop and we say Shema, and we say Ve'avta, Ve'hayu, and then Vayomer in that particular order, but at least, he's doing it in a particular way to achieve and to meet the requirements of what the Shema is. So I think the proofs that are bringing in that he says doesn't go back and say it, I think the fact that he says in this particular way is an indication that he is, in fact, saying the Shema in properly the correct order. The second thing that I
just 1 second. So are you questioning Bar Kapara, and you're saying why is he arguing on Rebbe's son? Is that what you're saying? Like, it seems surprising that he would argue?
Yes, because the Rebbe's son is basically saying, yes, he does go back and he does say it, which means that, the son would probably know best.
Okay, so that's a good question. What do you think? Why would Bar Kapara be so confident that Rebbe didn't go back? So anyone have any thoughts on that? How could Bar Kapara know he didn't go back and say Shema if Rebbe's own son says he did?
You and I look at a particular event, and you and I may have different ways of interpreting them.
Okay, all right, that's a thought. Yes, yes, Ben. Wait, are you answering this question, or you have something else to say?
It could be. Yeah, I want to answer the question. Yeah. I think that it could be that the son saw him do that a couple times, but not every day. And then that's the feeling that that the Rebbe is questioning it.
Right. So that's a good answer, I think. That Bar Kapara probably hung out with Rebbe many times, and he was with him the whole day, and he saw that he never did it. And the fact that Reb Shimon says that he did say the Shema, probably he did it here and there. There were times that he did recite it, and there probably was, it probably had to do with the fact that, Rebbe's son probably felt this is what, his father wanted to do always. And Bar Kapara said probably, maybe he did it once in a while, but he obviously didn't feel it was it should be done. He didn't feel it was necessary. And so there's obviously a debate going on, and they're both speaking from experience. So the question is which one was the main view of Rebbe, and which one was his. Was it just that he didn't have a chance when he was with Bar Kapara, and therefore he didn't do it, and he was exempt? But really he would have liked to. Is it more of a mitzvah min hamuvchar, maybe just an extra thing? He would have liked to do it if he was able to, and that's what his son used to see him every so often doing it. It seems like that would be the issue. So that would be my answer. I mean, Ben's answer, I should say, to your question, Ezra.
Well, the second item is where it says that he used, where you questioned what the word yadav.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there always a requirement to use the right hand to cover the eyes?
Um.
And if no, then it's possible he may have used either hand to do that while he was saying the Shema to himself. So that's the reason why it says Yadav as opposed to.
Okay, that's a good point. Ezra is saying that maybe it means he used his hands interchangeably, and not at the same time. No, on different days he would use his hands to cover his eyes, and therefore he uses the plural because he didn't always use his right hand. And even if you should use your right hand, maybe there was once that his arm was broken and he used his left hand, or once that his something was maybe he had a reason. It ended up practically that he ended up using both hands. But even if there is a reason, normally we say everything should be done with your right. There is a concept that everything should be done with your right, but maybe he had, of course, if there was some circumstance that didn't allow him to use his right hand, use his left hand. So that very nice. Okay, thank you, Ezra, for bringing. That's a good point.
I want to give an answer to that, Rabbi.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I'm thinking that if he was sitting and studying Torah, he had both hands free and he could use both hands. When we are praying, most of the time there is no table in front of us. We're holding the Siddur in one hand. We only have one hand available to cover our eyes. So it's preferable probably to use the right hand, and that's why we are using just the right hand. If we were sitting in front of a table, we could use both hands.
Wow, very, very interesting. Because you could also add to your answer that we hold the tzitzis in the other hand, and so he didn't have that hand available. So in other words, Rebbe had both hands available because he wasn't doing all the, he wasn't wearing his talus at the time, and therefore he had both hands available. So maybe but we hold our talus, our tzitzis in one hand, so we only have one hand available. Okay, interesting. Okay, good point, Ben, and a good question, good thought, Ezra. Yes. Okay. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on this Gemara? The question is, do you think Rebbe was wearing talus and tefillin at that time?
Probably would.
So the thing is, we're assuming that he started he started his class early in the morning. So one of the Sfarim says that if he would have put his tefillin on, in other words, before the time of Kriya Shema, you can't put tefillin on. So if they would have seen him put the tefillin on, they would have assumed he probably said Shema. But the proof of the Gemara must be that he didn't wear tefillin at the time. I see one of the commentaries mentions this. It's just a thought that he probably now the thing is the Gemara does say that if you say Shema without the tefillin, it's as if you're giving false testimony. So how did he get away with not wearing tefillin and saying the Shema? So it would seem to me that it's not a problem. Yes, Ben. Ben, yes.
Even if he was wearing the tefillin and if he had that tzitzit in his left hand, he could still use both hands with the tzitzit on his eyes.
No, the fall out. The tzitzis will fall out. If he spreads his hand apart.
Not when I lift my hand.
Well, okay, all right,
No,
all
but I'm
right. I
saying
guess
to put them on your eyes.
I guess you could. Maybe you could do it. Yeah. Maybe his tzitzis wouldn't reach. I don't know. Depends how big he was.
Mine would.
Anyway,
That's
all right.
true.
So that's possible. So the thing is, this is an interesting question. If he didn't wear tefillin when he said Shema, isn't it considered like you're giving false testimony? Because you're doing the Shema and you're not wearing the tefillin. Yes, Howard.
But if we're saying Rebbe was Toraso Umnaso,
Right.
then maybe that wouldn't be a problem.
Because maybe he was exempt from tefillin, you're saying. But no, see what's interesting is that Toraso Umnaso exempts you, and this is what the commentaries have to figure out. You're exempt from davening, but you have to fulfill all mitzvahs that are that their time is, that they're going to pass. You do have to fulfill all those mitzvahs. So the question is, why is davening different? So the commentaries have to try to figure out, why would davening be worse than other mitzvahs? They have to fulfill all the mitzvahs. Why don't they have to daven? But so the point is, he would have to do tefillin, and he obviously did put tefillin on later on. And so the question is, but is it considered like he's giving false testimony? So one of the commentaries says it's not a problem at all. Very, very simple. He says the whole false testimony is when you say in the Shema that you should tie them as a sign upon your arm. That's when you're giving false testimony. You're saying about tying them on your arm, and you're not doing it. And here, what did Rebbe do for his Shema? He didn't say anything about tying them as a sign upon your arm. He only said the first verse. So if you only say the first verse, you're not giving false testimony. So that's one of the answers that's given. It's also pretty obvious that even if the thing is, we often miss the time of Shema and what do? We say Shema before the davening, and then when we daven, we'll put our tefillin on later. So it's obviously not an issue, really, that you're giving false testimony, because you are going to be putting the tefillin on later, and you're not doing it on purpose. You're not purposely not putting tefillin on. So because of that, it's not an issue anyway. But that's just thought I'd bring that up. So in any event, let's see where we're holding over here. We mentioned about this argument about reciting the Shema, that the Rebbe's recital of the Shema, and if he would go back and finish or not, and say the Shema later or not. Okay, the next Gemara talks about falling asleep. Amar Reb Ila, we are about 12 lines up from the bottom of the page, maybe 13. Amar Reb Ila says, Berei de Reb Shmuel bar Mata, the son of Reb Shmuel bar Mata, Mishmei de Rav, in the name of Rav. Amar Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, if a person said Shema, v'nenas b'shino, and sleep took him over against his will. Yotza, he has fulfilled his obligation. Amar le Rav Nachman l'Doru Avdi. Rav Nachman told Doru was the name of his servant. Bipsuka Kama, in the first verse, Sairon, you should bother me. If you see me falling asleep, bother me and wake me up. Saron, pain me, to wake me up. Tefei, more than that, loy titzaron, don't bother me. Amar le Rav Yosef said, le Rav Yosef berei de Rabba, to Rav Yosef, the son of Rabba. So there's two rabbis, both are called Rav Yosef, and one of them is the son of Rabba. So the other Rav Yosef asks Rabba's son, Rav Yosef, he says, how did your father act? Avuch, your father, Heichi Hava Ovid, how would he do this? What was his way of dealing with falling asleep versus saying Shema? Heichi Hava Ovid. Amar Le, so he told him, B'psuka Kama Hava Mitzar Nafshe. In the first verse, he used to pain himself. Tefei Lo Hava Mitzar Nafshe. More than that, he wouldn't pain himself. Now, one way of understanding this Gemara is not that they would only say the first verse of Shema. Really, they said the whole Shema. But they wanted their servant to wake them up to make sure that the first verse, they were wide awake with kavana, that they would have the right kavana of the Shema and not just reciting it half asleep. So again, there are different commentaries in this Gemara, but so the Russian Rabbeinu Yaina, they learned that they would say the whole Shema, but they were menumnum. Menumnum is partially falling asleep. They weren't concentrating enough. They were saying the words, so they made sure that the first verse they would make sure to say, to say it with concentration. In this way, you don't have a question of how to, it's a mitzvah to have an obligation to say all the three portions. So rather, they would say them, but the kavana, they made sure at least the first verse. And if you look in Rashi, Rashi says, if you look in Rashi, Bipsuka Kama Mitzaron, in the first verse, the first verse, he told his servant to pain me, make sure I'm wide awake. Imri Isani Menamnim, if you see me drifting off to Arani Adsha and Nair Yafet, pain me until I'm wide awake, I'm awake good, the Pasuk Rishon for the first verse, which their understanding means the way the commentaries understand Rashi is that I should be a Nair Yafet, I should be wide awake, while the other parts of Shema, I'm awake, I'm not wide awake. I'm not, and that would be meaning that he would say the whole Shema, just he wasn't, they weren't so careful about the kavana to understand and feel the understanding of everything else that they're saying. Now, the other commentaries, the Ramban, the Meiri, they say that the main Shema, of course, is the first verse, and that's Midaraisa. And if a person falls asleep, it's called an inus. He fell asleep, so he has an exemption. And that's the question. Is this considered like a good enough excuse to transgress a rabbinic obligation? You fell asleep. Is that called an inus? You had no choice. So that's what that's what the commentaries seem to these commentaries seem to follow that view, that if it's called an inus shina. Anyway, that's the two views. Either they said the whole Shema, they just didn't have kavana, or possibly they didn't say it. They fell asleep. If you fall asleep, you're exempt. Okay, that's this Gemara. Let's continue. Amar Reb Yosef. Reb Yosef says, Prakton. Prakton, Rashi here translates it as someone who's lying on their back and their faces facing heaven. Their faces facing above. So they're lying on their back. Prakton, lo yikra kriyashma, should not recite kriyashma. Now I should mention that there are other translations of prakton that also include lying on your stomach and your faces into the ground. That would also be prakton. Rashi doesn't mention it here, but I saw it in Shulchan Aruch. It mentions that prakton is both. It really includes lying on your back and lying on your stomach. Both of these people should not recite Kriya Shema. The Gemara says, what does that imply? That implies like Shema, you can't say like that. But sleeping, other times you might be allowed to lie like that. Just for Shema, you can't. So the Gemara says, Mikrahu delay likri. Reading Shema, you can't do. Hamigna shaper dummy, but sleeping it would be good, would be okay. That would be considered okay to sleep like that. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi lied, he cursed. Aman dugania parkit, a person who sleeps in that way with their, let's say they're lying on their back, he would curse someone who slept that way. So it's not just saying Shema, but prakton is never really appropriate. And Rashi tells us the reason that it's not that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi cursed someone who would sleep on their back, because when a person sleeps, it's possible that he will have an erection and it won't look appropriate, look honorable for him, respectable that he has an erection. And therefore, if he's lying on his side, it's not a problem. No one really sees. But if he's lying on his back, so it will be considered. It won't look honorable. It'll look a ganai, embarrassment to him. So therefore, a person should never lie like that on their back. And so the Gemara is saying that we just mentioned that you shouldn't say Shema like that. It implies like sleeping would not be a problem. But we know that sleeping is also a problem. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi would curse someone who slept like that. So it says, Amri, we say, Migna, sleeping, kimatzli shaperdam. If a person is moite al tzidai, if a person leans, Rashi says, moite al tzidai ma'at, if a person leans a bit on their side, it's okay. So you can't lie exactly straight backwards in sleep, but for sleeping, you could lie a bit to your side. Now, the simple way of learning this Gemara is that you're not lying totally on your side. You're lying on your back, you're just bending a bit to the side, then it's not a problem. Mikra, but to say Shema, afal gav dematzli nami aser, even though you're leaning a bit to the side, it's also prohibited, because for Shema, you should be in a, you should accept the yoke of heaven in a position that doesn't make you look like you are Baal Gaiva, you are showing off. When a person lies on their back, even if they're a bit to their side, it does have an impression of Gaiva, of arrogance. And so for sleeping, it's not a problem because you get away from the issue that we mentioned earlier. But for saying Shema, that would be an issue because it's a derech gaiva. It looks like you are showing off. So for that's what it means that prakton, the person lying on their back, even if they're a little to their side, shouldn't say Shema. That's what Rabbi Yosef was saying. So the Gemara asks, but we find that one of the big rabbis would lean a bit, and that would and it seems that it's okay. Rabbi Yochanan would lean a bit, and he would say the Shema. So the Gemara answers, Shani Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is different. The Baal Basar Hava. Rabbi Yochanan was very, very large, Baal Basar. He was fat, very fat. And for him, it was too hard to do more than leaning a bit to the side. That's the most he could do. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan had an exemption. He had no choice. It was very hard for him to move around. He was so big, and he would bend a little to the side. That was considered okay for him to say Shema like that. A regular person shouldn't do that. Now, we translated the Gemara in a way different than maybe you might simply read it. A simple reading of the Gemara, maybe you would say, is that lying on one side is really not appropriate at all for Shema. The way I translated the Gemara was that you could say Shema lying down totally on your side, but if you're on your back and just leaning a bit to the side, that's a problem. But if you're totally on your side, you can say the Shema like that. And the reason I translated it that way is because I'm reconciling this Gemara with a previous Gemara, and that's not my own interpretation. It's the way commentaries explain this Gemara. And what are they reconciling? They're reconciling the fact that we learned when we mentioned the argument of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about how to say Shema. It said over there that you could say Shema lying down. Shoichev, when you're lying. It said, Kol Adam Kairei Kedarkoi, and then the Gemara explained it to mean even when you're lying down. The Gemara said, Beis Hillel Oimrim, Oimdim V'Kairin, you could stand and say Shema. Yoishvim V'Kairin, you could sit and say Shema. Matin V'Kairin, you could lean and say Shema. Holchem Baderech V'Kairin, you could go on your way. So it said Matin, you could be lying and saying the Shema. And therefore, what does our Gemara mean when it says that you can't say Shema when you're leaning? So to answer this contradiction, the way the commentaries explain it, understand it is, you are allowed to lie when you say the Shema, as long as you're fully lying on your side. But if you're partially lying on your side, you're on your back and you're just leaning a bit to the side, then you should not say the Shema. That's one way of learning this Gemara. Another way of learning the Gemara is that even if you're fully lying down on your side, you should not say the Shema that way. And the leniency of lying and saying the Shema is only if a person, in the olden days, people were very poor, and when they went to sleep, they would go to sleep. Their sheet was really their clothing. They would take off their clothing of the day, and they would sleep without clothing on, because I guess they were poor and or it's hot out. I don't know. They didn't have air conditioning, whatever it was. They would go to sleep under their sheet. Now, go to sleep under your sheet without clothing. If we tell you you have to get up to say Shema, you're gonna have to get dressed. So, because a person was already lying down, we didn't obligate them to get up and get dressed, because they didn't have, they were sleeping, they were in bed without clothing. So for them, they were allowed to, be lying and say Shema. But any other scenario, you wouldn't be allowed to lie down and say the Shema. You would have to say the Shema, not in that position. So those are the two ways of learning the Gemara. I'll try to go over this tomorrow a little, but if anyone has any questions, you may ask. Yes, Ben?